was talking about resource allocation workbench, which is a functionality that allows you to look at your resource management processes from a high-level visual perspective and perform quite a lot of functions from within the platform for resource management. So this is a simple slide deck that goes through what we'll be covering today. I will leave this and send this out after the call in case you want to come back to any of these specific topics that we're going to look at. This is everything we can manage from within an allocation board. An allocation board is tied to a specific resource management group. Ideally, you would have resources assigned within one resource management group so that they can't be over-allocated across multiple groups. But that's kind of back into the group structure. But once you have linked a group to an allocation board, you will be able to go in and perform any of these functions. And I'm going to share an actual demo instance and go into how we do some of those. So I'm going to turn my camera off and share my instance here. So here we see an allocation workbench. We have a list of our actual resource names here. So we'll see that we have our cloud management group over here. And within that, we have a few different groups of architects. So each one of these people can be specifically allocated as a separate individual. You can also put hours straight towards the actual group itself. When we move through the process, we're going to move those through planned hours, where we're actually going to have projected hours that aren't confirmed or allocated with a specific resource or group. And then we can be able to see, if we have over allocations across multiple groups. And we can also go in and look at the individual.
We have one individual that would like to, he's got a hand raised, or she.
Yeah.
Kong Ho. I'm going to allow him to talk. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Let me allow. I will. There, you're on. Kong Ho. Hello, Kong Ho.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. I was on mute.
That's okay.
Oh, hey there. Did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. I'll lower your hand. Thank you very much. Lauren, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So where I'm going to come back to is we have a couple of different allocations boards that I've built here. So this is our architects group. When I come into that board, it's already been created here. But if I kind of look at how I want to edit this board, we can change our parameters to a different group. We can focus on group manager, so it's anybody that comes under that, focus on demands and projects. So there's a lot of different ways that we can actually set up these allocation boards, depending on what direction we want to look for. Most people use these by group, so they can be like a group resource manager and kind of manage how their resources are allocated across the table. And then this is a specific group we're working with here. We have the architects. But if I wanted to move to demands and projects, I can just filter specific to demands and projects I want to see, whether or not they're assigned to me or they came in through a specific channel. So I can really, slice this any way I want to be able to look at resource management and use the same functionality we're about to look at any of those levels. Yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we will pull those up. So within this, we can see that we can switch out our hours and look for different sets. So we have planning requested, confirmed, allocated. An extension requested is going to be basically when a resource plan needs to be extended so that that resource can cover additional hours or additional requirements, or if the project has been extended itself. And that's going to bring you back into a request status if you have your process set up to allow the request for extension on those resource plans. We can create a new plan directly from within our allocation board. We have some questions here. Thanks, Molly. User rate defined as user level is different. If user rate is defined at user level is different and group level is different, what will be considered for the cost calculation? If the hours are going under the group rate, it's going to be the group rate. The group level, it's going to be that group rate. If it's going at the specific user level, it's going to be that user rate. I hope that answers. If you have anything else, let me know. All right, so we're going to go architects here. We can assign specific skill sets to our resource plans. I'm assuming you guys have some familiarity or are looking at implementing resource management. We're going to do a poll here in a few to see about where you are in your journey once we get that queued up. I want to know, like within your resource management journey, are you just thinking about starting? Have you begun? Are you looking currently to like do process improvement or expansion? Or is your resource, process basically really well founded and matured, but you may be not using the allocation workbench yet? So we're going to do full-time employee. With that. There we go. I'm going to save that. Now, if I request that, it's going to move it over and send out the notifications for approval for those resources. So I can sit here and build up resource plans as well if I want. And my demo instance might take a little bit longer than it's supposed to here. I'm going to switch this down to week, so we can actually go in and look at the actual planned and actuals and confirmed from the week view. And I can move my resource plan between different groups. I can go ahead and change the state here. So right now I'm going to take this resource plan, and since it's already confirmed, I'm going to allocate those resources, which means that's going to go ahead and schedule those resources for those hours and block those hours out for planning on any other projects. Okay, so it looks like we've got about half the people in the room are just beginning their journey specifically, and 13% are not started. So that means almost half the room is actually improving and expanding an existing process here. So we have a really nice mix in our group today. So when I go ahead and change, it keeps popping up in front of my screen. I go ahead and change my state to allocate. The poll's popping up in front of the, actually change the state. There we go. All right, so now we see that resource plan has been moved through to allocated. When I come back to my architects group, I'll see the allocated. There's one more confirmed here. I can go review that. That's planned 64 hours, 80 hours, 80 hours by week here. And I see my total overall planned is quite a bit. So I can tell that there's a range here and kind of scroll through and see when does this specifically end. If I want to back up to a month view, I'll be able to kind of see what's planned across December, January, February. So we see we have the plan and then confirmed and allocated. And those numbers are different right now because we have a specific amount of planned hours that haven't been confirmed and allocated for this group specifically. Right here, we have 2 full-time employees that were getting pulled out of the group, but there's actually 6 people here. So they're not getting fully pulled for all the hours that are available. We don't see any flags here. We can go ahead and allocate them as well. Is there an out-of-the-box integration available for importing the timesheets from a third party? There are a few different store application integrations for different timesheet systems, but that's specific to the actual system that you would potentially integrate there. But if you want to go up and look in the store, there are, I know there's like Harvest and a few other timekeeping systems have store apps out there, but there isn't an out-of-the-box integration for importing timesheets across the board as a global tool. There's another question here. I guess, Luis, you put up the rate model, so that's really helpful. Thank you so much. So once I come into my allocation board, I pull up the date range, I pull up the actual resources that I want to look at. I bring them through, look at the planned hours, and then confirm and allocate those. I can move the specific user and replace them with a different user if I like. So that can happen basically if you're looking at a group and then suddenly that resource becomes unavailable that you were planning to put in there. So David Heidemann, we'll just assume that he's been over allocated. So we're going to switch to Eric here. And we'll pick what period we want to replace him for. So we're going to say January or April. And it's going to delete the original allocation in case of a complete transfer. So that's only if I'm actually replacing every month that that person was originally allocated. So since I've switched now to just 2 months, I'm going to uncheck that box and allocate this user. So even after allocation, we can switch users within the same group. It gives us some flexibility here. But we do see I've got a flag here now because I've over-allocated Eric because I switched him out. So it will tell you if you put somebody up against something that they don't have enough hours to fulfill. So right now, Eric's only going to be doing so many hours for covering Davis, but we would actually have to get another resource to fill that in to make sure that there's enough coverage. So we're going to shift allocations here, and that's going to basically move our allocation to a different time frame with the same resource. So James here, I'm just going to extend his applicability. So I'm going to move him out to September and make him available till September. So I'm not replacing somebody else with him, but I already replaced Davis with Eric. Eric doesn't have enough hours to cover the entire allocation, and it looks like neither does James. So I've extended James to the next month, but he doesn't have enough hours to cover it either. So I'm starting this flag that my allocated hours are less than planned. So we can see that I have planned 120, and I have confirmed and allocated 100 here. And there's 20 split across 3, 4, 5 resources. So I need to get this guy in here for 20 as well. And I can just go ahead and throw 20 in here. And then I'm not getting the hours I need because I'm not going to have those filled out for everything else. But I can kind of go in here and fill out for James the remaining hours if I want, and just do that manually as well. So any questions about that? There's a few different ways to move allocations around. Typically what we see is people limit the capacity to move those allocations around once they're allocated to a resource manager or someone like that. The person that's actually requesting the resource plan, typically a project manager or some kind of stakeholder on a project, maybe isn't the best resource to actually look at the overarching needs of the whole organization and make sure that the resources are allocated appropriately. We have another question too. Nope, that one was the old one. So I'm not hearing any more questions about that allocation piece. I wonder if we want to go look at
Hi, Lauren. We have a few hand raised here. So I don't know who rose their hand first. I'm going to ask to unmute. Let's see. Did I get it? Yep, I did. So I apologize, but Suita?
Yeah, so I have a few questions here. So when we are allocating, I always like to see the capacity. So when we are clicking on the resource finder, we can see capacity, but I was testing it and I'm always unsuccessful in finding out how the system is calculating the capacity per month for the user.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be based on the resource schedule for that user. Have you set up resource schedules?
Yep. So, and another question is, does it count? Does it remove the time off and admin resource plan, operational resource plan in capacity?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that last question? I just.
So the question is, let's say I have an time off of 10% of my total capacity, or I have an operational resource plan for 10% of my total capacity. Well, the system will remove those hours from my total capacity, right?
Correct. Yes. As soon as they're confirmed, they're allocated.
Yeah, Lauren, Luis here. Just, there's two things. You have capacity and availability. They're a little bit different. So capacity, my total capacity, like I work 8 hours per day.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your availabilities, how many hours I'm available. So if you enter time off time, 2 hours tomorrow, for example, then your availability will be 6 hours. So indeed, to do allocation, I will look to the availability, how many hours are still available for that person to take a new work. All right, and then again, availability to take in account your allocations that you are already allocated. You reduce your availability. Your time off will be deducted there as well. So if you have time offs, if you allocate to projects, your availability will be lower than your capacity. If that makes sense.
So do we need to create a special resource plan to reduce my availability?
Or for PTO, you can use, there's a operational resource plans, or you can use the calendar as well.
Okay.
Sorry, Lauren, back to you, just to clarify, availability and capacity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Lois.
So if you're changing the schedule for resources, you're going to be changing their capacity, like Luis is saying. And then if you're actually allocating hours or days for that employee with a resource plan, you're going to be reducing their availability. But their availability is the total sum of how much capacity they have minus what they're already allocated for.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll now, looks like Jennifer also had a question.
I did have a question. It was related to the triangle exclamation mark where it was saying somebody was probably over capacity. But in the old, I used this before, and in order to see, I thought there was a way to see David, let's say this person, David Hederman, or any resource further down to see exactly how each of their weeks looked. Because I noticed that when you made a change, we weren't even on the correct date, which I find a bit frustrating. It doesn't move along to where exactly the problem was for that particular resource. You had to scroll, right? You started off in March, then you scrolled along. But when we were in March, we didn't see anything. We just saw this, the gray bits. And I just thought it was a bit weird. So is there not another way to see everything Davis is working on in my resource group? Or
so see everything that Davis is allocated to.
Yeah, every project.
Yeah, so right now this is sorted by the actual resource name, and I have the groups of resources. So I'm not going to see all the specific entries and the variants. So where's the one that I had open? I'm trying to look for the flag. That flag is basically saying that the hours allocated aren't the same, but since there's multiple months, it doesn't know if it should take me to a specific date, because here we see there's a discrepancy. There's also a discrepancy here. So it's just showing you the whole timeline and saying, hey, across this whole timeline, we don't have that built out.
Right, okay. So you're doing it, I see now. You're not doing it by what they're working on, as in projects. You're doing it by the groups. Or the,
so I'm managing it by the group specifically and making sure the group itself's resources are balanced.
Right.
And since the resource allocations are across all the members of the group, what I want to see here is, okay, well, I've got planned 96 hours. I've confirmed and allocated. I don't have a flag here because it's split and it covers all the hours that I have planned. But if I zero this out, then we would get a flag. And it would say that there's not enough hours allocated to cover what's planned.
Right, okay. That makes sense now. Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, there are other views you can look at other than the resource allocation board to see an individual's workload and what tasks they're assigned to and stuff. This is more just leveling resources across, organizational groups in my group and how they're assigned and things like that. And we see that we have the hours versus full-time employee, whatever your system setting is for full-time employee, which is usually, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week or whatnot. We don't have to actually track hours at that point, though. They're just going to say that this person's allocated fully across that time span. I see we have some more questions up here. Great tool for resource managers. Is there an allocation board display for project managers who have staff resources assigned to a project? Are those staff resources matrixed or shared with other projects? So you can definitely have staff resources be matrixed and shared with other projects, either or. And you want to be able to view requested allocated. Your question is, you want to be able to view the requested allocated confirmed hours for your project for a staff resource and also other projects where the same staff resource is assigned. So same thing just about, right? We're trying to look at one resource and see all the projects that are assigned to that resource.
Right. Yeah, I was, so when you have a resource who's shared amongst several projects and the projects are starting to collide, I want to be able to see what other projects that individual is assigned to that are taking his hours away from the work that I need him to do.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, you can actually, Molly's typing an answer right now. If user changes the schedule after allocating, now time is coming up as over-allocated, which more than the time, because it's more than the time we specified at the property that will happen in this case. So if a user changes the schedule for the resources, and that's going to change up that they're over-allocated. So their schedule was reduced is what I'm taking from this. And then it's showing up that they're over-allocated. We would have to, what would happen is it would throw flags and we would need to unallocate some of those hours or add a resource into the pool or something like that. So if we reduce schedule across a group for all those resources and we don't have enough hours anymore, we would need to add another member of the group or reduce the allocation for that group. But yeah, it'll throw a flag up if you change the schedule. I think that one's there. You can define total capacity. Molly's got some docs up here. I hope everybody can see there's some good resources being provided as well that are a little bit more in-depth answers. All right. We're going to switch to, no, not well. So here, I just switched to look at just one user resource, and we can see that this is only Davis, right? Only that one resource. So now I can see his allocations across that one resource. So I did filter that there, if that makes sense. I think that's what was being asked, right? It's just to be able to see that resource and what he's allocated to. Let me know.
Right, but that's, you know, by individual. But I was wondering if there's a view for all individuals assigned to a particular project, so that in one consolidated view I can see what, you know, say there's a Java developer, you know, a network engineer and so forth assigned to the project. I can see all their allocations to my project, and I can also see what other things they're working on. So that if they're working on another project for a different project manager that has higher priority, I'll just have to adjust my schedule to allow them to work on that. And then I'll have to wait until they're done to work on my project, and vice versa. If my project's higher priority, I can reach out to that other project manager and say, hey, I need this person this week now. You can have them next week or later this week or whatever. And I'm looking for that kind of consolidated view.
Okay. So the question is then, okay, so you want to see it that's kind of two different views, right? So if I want
Correct.
to see the actual, yeah, there's two different views there. Yeah.
So rather than having,
project.
yeah, one at the project level and one at the resource level within the project.
So in the project form, you know, there's a related list at the bottom that has resources.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that would be one of the views you're talking about, unless we built a dashboard or a report or something like that.
Right.
And then the other view is you want to see for this resource oh, well, they're actually assigned to this project that's red and it's a higher priority than mine.
Correct.
You can tell. Well, and if they're not over allocated, they should have hours for that project and yours, though, right? But you just want that situational awareness when they're actually dealing with something that's an issue.
Correct.
Gotcha. So yeah, I mean, I think making a dashboard for that would be fine. If I wanted to go and look at the specific projects, I can see their priority and everything, but I don't have a specific resource filter here. You can
Okay.
go in and create a filter though, and say, okay, I want to see projects these projects have this resource as a resource on them. So you would just take this basic list and filter it to projects that have that resource in them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get it.
So that you can make a filter view like that. You could also build a dashboard if you wanted to kind of get fancy and have something that was more, visually appealing. Because I mean, if I filter this down to one individual, maybe I have 6 projects. So these are my top 6 projects. You can see this one's yours. It's high priority, but I've also got 2 other high priority projects, and 2 of them are behind, right? So then
Right.
I would have a list that would show me the basics, and you could make a more complex dashboard or something like that to get that data too, though.
Okay.
Hi, Lauren, Molly here.
Mhm.
So there may be a few other ways for one to see their projects and their resources. One of them is actually through the project workspace. You can see it. And then also there's the ability to look at resource plans. And I want to think it's by Lewis is saying, I'm thinking it's the resource finder, and you're able to see those resource plans by project groups and things
Yeah,
like that.
I can add there. Yes, on the project, Lauren, there is a resource tabs. That's the place where the project manager create request plans.
Correct.
And once people is allocated to your project, you click on a resource plan, and below, maybe you can open any of those projects. I don't know if there's one with resource plans on your instance, Lauren, but then on the bottom of the page, you can see, okay, if I click on this resource plan, I see the names that are allocated, and I can see their availability, capacity, and as well you can expand. Now is on the old project workspace, Lauren. You can see other projects on which they are allocated. That's one way. Another way, the resource managers. There is another capability, then you need more time to explore that one, and we can share the link. There's some resource reports that you can report by group, by user, and then you see everything that person is working, for example.
Yeah. We can go look at some of the reports too. Good idea. So yeah, that project workspace is great.
If you type there on all resource reports, if I remember the name, on the menu itself.
Group allocation, group member allocation details. This is the one I think we're looking at.
No, on the menu, if you don't mind, Lauren, on the top there, all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Resource report, if I remember well the name.
Resource report.
Yeah. Yes, first option. Those are, we call reports, but they are pages indeed that bring some information about resource allocations. I'll take the link. I'll get the link, and then maybe you can share for.
I just
otherwise,
shared
we
it
spend a
in
lot
the
of time
chat.
here. Oh, great.
Yeah.
So we want our availability. We can do utilization, committed, allocation, and allocation details. We want our user. And we'll maybe pick a user that has their monthly and hours. So we'll run that, and then we'll see Davis's allocation across the months coming up. We can also set this up to look at weeks.
Yeah, and if you click on that number, that will show some details as well. Yeah, clicking on number, click on the 80 there, December perhaps, because it means they have some allocation in December. Yeah. So you see, yeah, those are the project tasks in this case. They allocate to tasks. This person.
Those are actual projects, and then we have project tasks here as well.
So how do I
This
change
is-
the so how do I change the filter so that I can see all the resource allocations like this for a particular project?
You would just move to a different, I'll show you right now.
That'd be great.
I'll do this again. So we have the report type. You pick one of these, and then you pick entity type. So you said for an entire project,
Right.
you want to see the resources?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so then we just pick the project here. I think there's an HR one that has some good allocations set up in it. And then we're going to see, you can say all resource plans, or you can pick a specific resource plan. So, and that doesn't have, this actually doesn't have a resource plan in it, so I think it's going to show no data.
Okay.
But yeah, if you pick a project that has that in there, then it'll pop up with the same detailed information, but it's going to be for that specific project itself.
Okay. Thank you.
And these are all the levels. So we can look at portfolio program. We can also go to another task if we want to move into a different type of task that we're working on. Any other questions about the resource report?
What role do you have to hold in order to get access to those resource reports? You know, which
you would need the RM user role at a minimum.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I don't know if you would have much access to look at any data that wasn't data that you were actually assigned to there. So you probably want to be a resource manager to see across the board everything, though.
Okay. Thank you.
You can also publish these to anybody, so and you can export them into PDF, Excel, that kind of stuff too. So you don't have to have, you can share this data in this format with people without them having the role at all. Well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Like we are getting answers to questions over here. I don't see any that haven't been answered yet. I see some stuff in the chat. Can we see a plan versus actuals in this resource report? So let's see. What we would look at there is our forecasted and committed utilization. So forecasted would be our plan, committed would be our actual committed, but we're not going to see our actuals that are hours that have been burned there. That's the closest we can get from the specific report. Let's say group, architects. So there's our forecasted utilization for the architects. That's everything that's been planned, but we're not going to see our actuals from there. If we wanted to see those actuals, we would want to go look at the actual project record or go back to our allocation workbench and look at it from there. What else? These are all wonderful questions. Well, if we don't have any more questions, ran a report on a project in the resource reports module on a current project. Pulled up a couple of individuals who had resource plan on the project, and then the rest were at the group level. I think this is because the resource plan was allocated as a group versus user level. I'm looking at that. Yeah, I mean, if you allocated them based on a group level, it should basically have that group and then have those allocations across the members of the group. But if the other members of the group didn't have hours available, it may have only allocated hours to a couple of members in that group, and that might be why you're just seeing a few individuals there. Is there a scenario where you would have an individual as part of more than one group? I've seen people do that. It's typically not advised because you're not actually able to ensure that that user isn't getting allocated more than once within those different groups. So typically we have people group other resources into one resource group and then pull from that pool or pull from that person as an individual. And that way the system keeps track of that pool of labor resources as one.
Please put your questions in the Q&A so we can then record them, because our chat will go away.
Yeah, and if there's any questions, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, Lauren. We do have one about the resource rate is changing after resource plan is allocated. Will it affect the cost of previously created records? So there is an allocation and then there is a cost, which, I'm trying to understand. We have that allocation plan at a specific rate, but when the time card comes in, that's where the cost is. So,
yeah, all the line item time cards that are billed against a project before a rate changes are going to stay the same when they're complete, but any new time card entries are going to use the newer rate.
Okay, does that help, Sagnish? I apologize if I didn't say your name right.
But is it going to affect the planned resource plans?
So if there is a hard, go ahead, Lauren, I'm sorry.
I was saying, take for an example, if there is a resource plan has been requested and then it has been allocated, and post that the resource rate has been changed. So how is it going to affect? Because based on the rate of the resource, the cost plan is going to be created, right?
Yeah.
So is it going to affect the
there's
a created cost plan or no?
There's not automatically recalculated, but there are options on the project itself to recalculate the costs of the resource plans or at the individual resource plan. So we'll send the link. There's more details there. So the project manager can apply that recalculation at any point.
Okay.
But it's going to keep the original rate cost unless you recalculate it that it was originally done on, right, Luis?
Mm-hmm.
Correct, yes.
So there's not any automatic back changing once you change a rate and it's already been a cost plan, built.
No, because some project managers, they want to keep the same planned costs because they already approved a budget or something, so they just want to new costs from the new resource plans. So some customers, they don't want this automatic application. Some other project managers, they want to review the resource plans with the new costs for everything. So that's why is by resource plan or by project.
Perfect. And I see another question here in the chat as well. We want to put those in Q&A so we can track them, but we want to run through a scenario, Nandini, for capacity planning and resource management based on demands and projects. So what I'm thinking you're looking at there is you want to see, correct me if I'm wrong, you want to see how, if I have demands and projects that maybe don't have resources allocated, I can go ahead and see what my capacity is or would be, and then compare that to what my availability would be if I did commit those or allocate those. Is that what we're trying to look at?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I think that might be a little bit more aligned with Alignment Planner Workspace in some ways, as far as seeing the demands out into the future. If part of your question is including that we want to be able to see, where we're going to run over on allocations, you can see some of that from there too. But as far as demands go, we would just want to be able to look by task here. So I can select a specific area or project or demand here. I can also go back to the resource reports like we were looking at earlier, and that's going to have a lot of capacity to build out reports for demand specifically. And you want to see everything across the portfolio though, huh? Right?
Yes, everything not specific to a demand, and that's why we want to check the availability, right?
Yeah, so this would be availability across demands and projects for the digital transformation portfolio. That's probably the report you're looking for.
And it's clickable, right? I can click into any of these and then it pulls for, and then I can see the resources in each one of those.
Absolutely. And if there were allocations here, you would see who was allocated to it. But right now, I don't know if any of these have allocations in them. There we go. Yeah, so these are the allocations. There's James is already allocated. And we've got some others. Vanessa. So we can see some resources that are allocated to this specifically. But yeah, it's click through.
But where is the availability showing? Is that the numbers that is the available, or those are allocated?
Yes, those are hours that are available. And then the allocations that it's showing are what is reduced from that number. So these are the available hours that are left after the current allocations.
So can I use this board itself to allocate or request?
To allocate a specific resource?
Right.
No.
I can't.
No, this is just like a report. But you can use the allocation workbench to allocate resources. We can go look at that again too. That would be more where you're actually doing allocations yourself. So we can build a workbench for that portfolio, and then we would have the specific groups that are potentially going to have resources across the portfolio and do allocations that way here.
Yeah, maybe if you show the finder, Lauren, because then when you are, planning to allocate someone in a resource plan, and the resource finder will show you who from that group. No, there, if you see the finder, there's an icon with a person on the right, top right. Yeah. So if you click on resource, so those lines represent, if you click on one of those lines, any line on the top, for architects, for example. Yeah, close this one, please. Yeah, so like, let's say I want to allocate people to that resource plan. So someone requests for 2 FTEs from the architects group. And here on below, you are seeing, okay, everybody that's part of the architects group and their availability. So that shows, for example, nobody's available in December 2021. Yeah, thankfully, is on the past. And you'll see the availability for you'll see the availability for the same periods of the resource plan. So you can say, okay, I can allocate anybody because everybody's available in this case. Right?
So I would use allocation workbench to see their availability, and I can request.
And you can allocate here as well, yes.
And I can allocate as well.
Yeah, so here's for the resource manager to work, right? And there is on the project, there is a tab called resource when the project manager requests people for the project. And then here, the resource manager would receive that request and say, okay, who I can allocate to that resource plan that's coming from project ABC, right?
Yeah, so here I've selected Davis and Eric. Sorry, go ahead.
So I'll give you a scenario. So we have, let's say we have 40 demands, right? And we have 10 projects, 40 demands and 10 projects. And I just need to do the capacity planning for all of these 40 demands and 10 projects. I know what resources, not on a user level, but I know on a group level. I need 2 architects, I need 4 developers, that kind of a level. I know which groups they are. Which board should I use to request it? Is it like I have to create resource plan for each of those demands? Is that the way that I should do it, or can I use one of these allocation workbench, and I go on a portfolio level and see through the demands for each of those and then do it?
You would create
Yeah,
a resource plan for, go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead. You're going to say the same thing. So feel free.
You would create a resource plan for each demand, but then you would go actually do the allocation of the resources from the allocation workbench. So creation of the resource plan is kind of like a, hey, we're going to need this much, labor for this project. It's just saying what you need. But then from an overarching perspective, it's much easier to look here and see if I have availability and allocate them across multiple projects here in the allocation workbench. Because
so it is a 2-step process. So it is a 2-step process. First is going through the demands resource plans, requesting it, and then coming into as a resource manager on the allocation workbench and actually allocating them based on their availability.
Exactly. And what that does is it lets your project managers decide how much they need from a certain group or skill set or user and say, well, this is what I need. Doesn't mean they're going to get it, because sometimes there's just not enough resources to do everything that all these projects would need. So this is like more the resource manager view that's going to balance those resources across the whole organization or their whole group or this portfolio, whichever grouping you're kind of looking at, and making sure those resources aren't, overburdened, across all the different projects.
How do I find the capacity utilization?
The capacity to utilization?
Yes.
So the overarching capacity was that resource report we showed earlier.
Yeah.
And then forecasted utilization is over there. We have that. You can look at that for, out months in the future. As far as your capacity right now, we're just basically, we don't have like a capacity graph here that just shows that, but I can go look at the actual resource group.
No, you can see capacity here as well. If you click, you see beside that date, December to August, there is a hierarchy. No, on the left, the hierarchy icon.
Oh, up here.
Yeah, then you see more things. You see confirmed, allocated, availability, and you can include the capacity. You see on the three lines on the top as well. You can include. Okay, I want to see capacity as well. Yeah.
We can put everything in here so you can see.
Okay.
Yeah, capacity doesn't come all the time because it's normally something you use to allocate people. It's normally availability, but you can if you want to do more detailed analysis here.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But you'll have to have all your resources set up with schedules and everything like that in order to see that capacity accurately.
Right, that's the prereq, right? If I need to, before even the resource plan comes in, I need to have the schedule for each of those resources and the users and the group set up. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. One last question. Can the same resource be in multiple groups?
So they can be in multiple groups, but ideally not multiple resource groups. And a resource group is basically a labor pool for a specific type of group. So this architects group, that's a resource group here. And we don't want to have people that are in more than one of those because potentially we could allocate them, for their schedules in both of those groups. So it gets complex to manage how much is Davis available in the architects group versus the other group he's in. Right? So when you have people in multiple groups, you run into an issue if they can be over-allocated, but not show in the system because they're not actually, those groups aren't managing like, oh, I actually only have 20 hours for this group and 20 hours for this group because I'm in 2. So I've seen people do that, but they had to develop a really complex process to manage that properly. So I wouldn't say it's best practice unless there's like a unique use case.
Okay.
That use case that was just described about a user being in two different resource pools, how do you, and you said that would be very complex, how do you set the availability or capacity for a user who has both, say, operational support responsibilities as well as project responsibilities? So say, 10 hours a week, you have to allocate a reserve time for them to answer or support incidents and problems. And then, 20 hours a week, that person should be available to work on projects. How would you set up the resource record for that individual?
I would set up their resource record the same. They would be in a resource group with a resource schedule saying what their capacity is. Then, as far as incidents and everything, you can have the hours from all the system tasks basically roll into resource management. So the problem is setting up how do people track time for incident work more than it is that not rolling up. They automatically will, it'll automatically take the hours that they're actually working out of that. If you're tracking the time for people that work on incidents. But that's where you have to build the linkage. It's basically making sure that you can account for that time people spend on incidents and other tasks in the system. Whereas projects, we tend to schedule the amount of hours and say, hey, it's going to be 20 hours a week and things like that. So you have this idea of that. With incident, you're just kind of looking at how long each, how much work each record's taking.
There's also
another
operational plans. You can create an operational plan and it'll remove that time from that person's capacity. It'll reduce their availability by number of hours, percentage, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually you can also book time against operational work on operational resource events. If you want to track all the hours, actual hours as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, as we're wrapping up, we've got a few minutes left. I just want to say thanks to everyone for coming. This is our new meetups that we've moved to from office hours. This format we plan to continue around the middle of each month, every month. We will be sending out some more information with some additional topics that are coming up soon. Really appreciate any feedback or anything like that you have. We'll be sending out links to the communities and things, and with additional information for these coming up. And yeah, if we have any final questions, we can use this last couple of minutes for those. But I really appreciate everyone coming and look forward to next time as well.
Is the screen recording going to be available anytime soon?
Yeah, that'll go out on communities for the SPM product success page. So we'll keep those recordings putting up there. I don't know if you knew where they were on office hours. It will be a new location, but we'll send that out to the attendees today.
Okay.
And
same with the Q&A materials.
Yes, everything that came through the Q&A questions will be part of that. I'm trying to see if there's anything. I tried to talk through every question that came through chat so that we could hear it on the audio. So anything that you don't see that I talked through, it came through chat. All right. Well, with that, I will go ahead and wrap us up. Thank you so much, everyone. Look forward to next time, and we'll get the materials out to you shortly.